Are you a good leader? That's just one of the questions we're exploring in this, the first episode of the second series of Real Impact. This is the Leadership Reality Check, where I'm joined by Rebecca Sangster-Kelly of Studium Consulting, where we have some direct and often impassioned conversation. Together, me and Rebecca really get under the skin of what makes a good and effective leader, how leadership can impact organisational culture, and what not to do. We also ask big questions such as, is it ever okay not to care about your employees? What's wrong with bringing your own people in? And how to tread the line between being a doer and a leader. Let's get into it. Rebecca, welcome to Real Impacts. This is our second series, and today we're talking all about leadership. And this episode is called the Leadership Reality Check. So we're going to be exploring what leadership means in 2026, unpacking some common beliefs and maybe challenging them, and also talking through some common misconceptions about leadership. But before we go any further, can you just take a second to introduce yourself and what you do?
No.
That's not what we rehearsed.
I know. So I'm Rebecca Sangster-Kelly. I am a communications and stakeholder management coach, and I help people engage and communicate effectively and reach the audience that they think they know and help them understand it better.
Okay. So I'm going to kick off with a big question, and there might not be one simple answer, but what makes a good leader?
I think a good leader is someone who asks questions and knows who to ask.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of, so as I'm been a management consultant for years, and when I've been in the room with people, especially different consultancies, different stuff, I always grade where I think the person is by what kind of questions they ask, or if they ask questions, or if they assume they have to know all the answers. And the transition from someone who is a doer to a leader is realizing you need to figure out who you can trust to make the best decisions. Because when you're the doer, you have a very niche thing that you need to deliver this. You've been really good at delivering. That's why you got promoted. You're being rewarded for your progress, the value you're giving to the company. But there's a transition that happens eventually, or should, where the person realizes they need to bring the best people around them to consult, to assess, to make that decision. And if you think that it comes down to you, you're not using the smorgasbord of opinions and expertise that is around you, which you should be doing as a leader.
It's interesting, the point around doer and thinker, listener, leader, because that's exactly what happens. People are really good at their job and they get promoted up into leadership positions. And without calling anyone out, I can think back to through my career history and think of people who are excellent doers and they've ended up in those positions. But I can think of quite a few of those people who remain doers when they're in those leadership positions, which is a challenge. So how do you get out of that cycle?
Well, usually when I work with people, sometimes I've recommended the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. So the book, I originally bought it because I read about it and I thought, oh, this will help me communicate with my leaders and figure out. And then I read it, I'm like, oh, I do 3 of these things. Like one was, I give too much value. So it's that when I was having a direct report, I would tell them how I did something similar, and apparently that demotivates people.
Okay.
So you're supposed to let them figure it out for themselves, because if you tell them how you do it, they're like, oh, I'm extremely competitive. I am competitive, but I didn't think I was competitive to the point of being ridiculous. And then I had to do some self-reflection. I'm like, yeah, no, who are you competing against? Why do you need to do this? And there was a third one that's not coming to mind, but it was 3 of them. There was like, I need to work on myself. I need to reflect. I need to understand what's triggering this behavior, because this is not suitable in a leadership position and I'm leading people. That's what I need to do. So that's a book that I recommend to people to look through. I have had clients who've told me that they've had a manager give it to them passive aggressively. I do not recommend doing it that way. It is do it in a constructive way if you're good at it. But it's a great book to give you an idea of an overview. The other piece is understanding when you're leading, who are you mimicking? And why do you think that person's a good leader? Because sometimes you are mimicking the person above you because that's the only example you've had of leadership, or you see them as powerful. I've had, because I do stakeholder management coaching, I've had people tell me someone's really great at office politics, and I'm like, no, they're good at being aggressive. They're aggressive. That's not being strategic.
Is being good at office politics a good thing? Yeah, it might. That might benefit the individual, but is that going to benefit the team, the organisation, and delivering their goals?
So I think that there's a two-part to this. If you're in a situation with office politics, you haven't usually created it. You are reacting and managing the situation you're in and surviving. A lot of people are in a point of survival. And actually, I was thinking about when questions, and when I was preparing for this podcast, I was delved into Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. And they had a great study, and it was about regulatory focus theory. And it was about how people ask questions if they're looking to gain, so a promotion, or if they're looking to prevent loss. And people ask fewer questions if they're going for gain, if they're going for promotion, if they're looking at this is what I'm going to achieve versus I'm responsible for the loss if it happens. And that's a context set by the culture. That's the rules of engagement you have when you're in a leadership position. And that context will drive whether you have to play politics or not, or at least you need to survive long enough to get out to work somewhere else because you can't be fired.
That point where you spoke about either responsible for the loss or the benefit, I don't think it is either or. I think as a leader, you're accountable for delivery in that area of your business, of your organisation, right?
In the perfect world, yes. But usually most people, when they're in a situation, they're reactive, and they'll react to what they're used to, their MO, their regular MO, or what the MO is set, the modus operandus for that situation they're in. You are reacting to the people you're around. You're reacting to what people expect of you. So like when I look at all the companies investing in AI, and you hear about the bubble that's about to burst, people are saying that's like the Enron bubble, but they are still going down that road. And you know that it can't be, it's driven, in my view, like I don't know these leaders, like this is what I'm watching from the outside. I wouldn't be surprised if it's driven by a need to show you're making progress because you either have an investor or a board that's expecting something that is ridiculous or impossible, but you have to show it. And what are they going to do? Just replace you if you say no? This is where I have a hard time with the whole what makes a good leader, because a leader in their own situation, their perfect world, yes, leaders should do stuff. What's the context that person is acting in? And the context will provide a structure they have to work within. And going back to your question, does someone need to be good at office politics? You need to be aware of what you're dealing with and make decisions based on your own ethical beliefs of what you're in and what your boundary is. Where's your level? What aren't you willing to do? A situation someone suddenly finds themselves in after they've worked really hard to get there, and they're like, oh boy.
Now I'm here, and there's a completely different set of expectations.
Or the unwritten ones that they're stepping into and they don't understand why someone's reacting. Yeah.
I think what we've discussed so far around what makes a good leader, we've sort of said there's a dividing line between you're a doer, then you become a leader. But I don't think it is that black and white. There's a whole range from like pure leader, let's say visionary CEO, to doer frontline at the other end. And that varies both in size of organisation, but even in the largest of organisations, size of team. So we work a lot with internal comms teams, and even in the biggest companies, some of the biggest companies in this country and the world, the internal comms team might only be 3 people or 4 people.
Yep.
So the leader in that team is also very much a doer as well.
Yes. No, that's it. It is the irony.
With a completely different set of expectations.
Oh, yeah.
So like how do those people they have feet in both camps and they're constantly having to step in and out of both roles?
One of the reasons I haven't gone into internal comms because I started as a management consultant working with internal comms teams. I've executed program comms. I understand brand and such. And I really feel for people who are leading comms in organizations because usually because everything's fine, people don't realize how much they're working at it to keep it fine, even just fine, because of everyone trying to get them to change things. That is going to ruin everything. It's a thankless job. Like it's a thankless job by leaders for a lot of leaders. There's some leaders who do get it, and when they do, amazing. But it's difficult. It's hard to be strategic and think through things when you are reacting to what people are demanding of you because they're higher up. Like you have the title of being a leader, but you're not being treated like a leader necessarily by the leadership, which really is demoralizing.
Yeah.
But the health of the company is based on communication and engagement and landing the message you need the people to absorb and believe. It shouldn't be. It's unfair.
Yeah.
It's an unfair position for them to be in.
Yeah. Really, it's then are those people managers or leaders?
Depends on the corporate situation they're in.
Yeah, of course.
It's the hardest part about soft skills is that it's difficult to measure.
Yeah.
So people don't measure. And when it comes to people making decisions of, we should just do this because that's what we need to do, it lacks nuance. It lacks an understanding of your audience of what you need them to do and whether that decision is the right one for them. But if you have a view of if a leader thinks they know their people and doesn't ask, then that's a red flag. If they don't investigate, or they're just talking to people who are like them. A lot of leaders zero in on people who think and do as them because they've created a bubble. Most people do. We gravitate to what's comfortable. And leaders are no different in that sense.
I'm smiling because this has just reminded me of something, which is a post I saw on your LinkedIn profile. You advocate for leaders in new organisations building teams from people they know or who've worked with in the past, and you got a bit of pushback on that. I think you said building your posse. I think that's the phrase you used.
That sounds like me.
Building your effing posse.
Yeah, so it's great if you can arrive in a company and you have support. If you have people you can work with, people that you've inherited. That's ideal. Less work for you. People are already wanting to produce. They already want to be productive for the overarching goal of the company. The reason I made this video is because there's a view that there's only one way to be a leader. There's only the only acceptable way to build your team. But we're not in an ideal world and we're not an ideal company. Usually, like if you're an ideal company, great. But if you have inherited people who are being protected by an incompetent manager, they're like, especially if they're dotted in is the worst. Oh my goodness, dotted in. It's so unnecessary on so many levels. If you're not getting the results you need, why waste energy on someone or a situation that's not going to improve and it's just draining your energy when you could be using it elsewhere? If you've worked with good people and they could benefit the company, why not bring them in? If you know you can trust them because they're decent, why not? They still have to go through a hiring process. It's not like you just can parachute them in. They still have to measure against criteria in HR and your manager, but it's another way to look at it. And when I work with my clients, I give them options. I give them, these are the options. These are the risks. Always be aware of the risks. This is the potential impact and benefit. Which A, B, or C? And then we line out the strategy of where's the strategy, what we want to achieve, and we build out the tactics and support the actions to get there. But just chasing that there's only one right way to be a leader or deal with a situation, or that you're the failure because everyone else is incompetent around you, it doesn't track for me. People are nuanced. People come from different backgrounds, different expectations. Like when I work with a team, when I have working with an offshore team in India or China, I know there has been, maybe it's changed over time with different generations, but there was a culture I was dealing with where they would just tell me yes. And I learned I had to ask them specifically, okay, when you say yes, what does that mean? To get them to explain, to make sure that they weren't saying yes because I, as a leader, said they had to do it. So all they know they're going to get flack from their manager if they don't say yes. What is the impact of why is that person doing this? Can I impact that situation, or do I have to go around a different way to make sure the situation improves? What do I have to do to make this a better, workable, productive engagement instead of just saying, oh, they just said that. I know they're just going to say yes. I can't trust them. That's not, what am I going to do to try and improve that? What do I do? Put the checks and balances in. We can't be lazy and just accept that things are going to be the way they are and complain. Complain if you've tried and it failed, then yes, we'll go out for drinks. We will. We will drink it all. But at least try something different. Do an experiment. Look at the stimuli from what you did. Because if we just do one way of doing things, it doesn't work for everyone. Like, yeah.
You touched on culture within what you just said. And when you're talking about leadership, culture invariably comes up and vice versa. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? The culture or the leadership? Does leadership create culture? Does culture create leadership? If it's a cycle, how can we stop that cycle?
So I've thought of this quite a bit. Yeah, because it is a reoccurring one of where is the problem? I think the problem is starting with a culture, especially when the company starts small, and just expecting it to have status quo as you grow without tending to it. I think you should look at culture as a garden. Because it's like once you let the weeds grow, more weeds come. Like if you're not going to invest and value the culture you've created, you can't be upset if it changes or if your actions are perpetuating a culture that you didn't expect. So if you keep promoting people say if it's like a sales organization and you have a sales manager who is not very good to their employees, they run them to the bone, they have burnout, but they have results, and you keep promoting them, you're indicating to the people below that that the values aren't actually important. You need to burn out, you need to burn your team to the ground, and then you'll get promoted. You have demonstrated through action that money is more important than these values that you've put up there saying, oh, we're this. Put this in your promotion thing of how you've demonstrated excellence or psychological safety. Sorry, I shouldn't. No, psychological safety is essential for a healthy culture, but the amount of times people give it lip service. But yeah, I like the analogy of a garden. If you want a beautiful garden, you can't get upset if you don't tend to it and it goes wild and it grows things you didn't expect.
Yeah.
People don't miss a good culture until they realize they don't have it or they see it somewhere else.
We've established that culture and leadership are intrinsically linked, and it becomes a bit of a virtuous and self-fulfilling cycle, leadership to culture, culture to leadership. So if you want to change culture, is it as simple as changing the leadership? But then how does that impact the culture? And
so I would actually take a step back further of how long are you willing to work at it to achieve it? Because it's not an easy fix. It's a long-term goal. This is going to sound like really random. So everyone, I'm Canadian. That's where the accent's from. So I came here to do my master's in international relations. Came here to study 15 years ago. And my dissertation was, and this is before all the red pill women aren't having enough babies things. It was the impact of the demographic deficit in developed states. And because the idea that women people are focusing on sending their money elsewhere and not having kids or can't have kids or why not? So I looked at different studies of how financial incentive got certain countries, got their populations to blip. But the thing was, the countries weren't doing it long enough to see a genuine impact, because you're looking at 20 to 25 year investment in, no matter which party got in, we want to grow our own people. But that would take a government view on it. Similar with culture, like doing a big cultural shift of where people are how people are working, how people are acting. This is a long-term shift. Anything human behavior is a time-heavy investment to get to where you want to go. So how much do you want a good culture? Or you just want to accept that just not great, but we're willing to put up with it. Like it was a study of onboarding telemarketers. And they looked, instead of telling people, oh, this is a great place to work. Oh my goodness, you'll be so happy. We are all friends here. Oh, everything rosy. Instead of that, they were honest and said, yeah, this job's hard. This is what it's like. This is what you have to deal with. And that cohort of intake had less attrition because they were honest.
Because they knew what to expect.
They knew what to expect. If we stop lying to people, accept that you don't care about culture. I'd like to see a company that just says, yeah, we want to make cogs. That's what we're focused on, making cogs. No matter how hard you work, as long as we get this many cogs, this is what we want. What's the output you want? Are you chasing culture because you feel you should? Because you want to attract the right talent? If you want to attract the right talent, fine, but actually create the culture you say you have. I think it's the lying or the misrepresentation that is the worst thing you can do if you want your employees to trust you. Because once they get a niggle that you're not being upfront, that's when you lose them. Once, like, you were actually, the other thing, like when you're saying, like, how do we do culture versus like where do you start if you want to change a culture? The other thing of having a long-term plan is that a lot of companies have so many initiatives that fail that long-term employees usually just, if you were in a place that this usually happens, we're like, oh, we're going to do this. You wait 6 months, see if it's still around. Are you actually going to put effort into it if it's not?
And the same thing gets recycled 5 years down the line. Yeah, I've been there.
It's the best thing you can do, instead of getting all in a knot about do we have the right culture, just be consistent. Give people knowing what they're going to get. Actually, so I mark persuasion, influence, and business courses for The Economist online, so Economist education. So I get paid a nominal fee to read substandard responses to a framework. Okay, some are great. I love it when I have someone who's using the framework properly. But I had this one hiring manager who was he a hiring? No, he's a manager. But he's trying to get his top performer not to leave, even though he didn't get the promotion he'd been promised. And he'd been burning the midnight oil. And he's like, and he was going through this, how he's going to convince him to stay. And my response to his assessment was, his approach was fine. It wasn't excellent. But I'm like, do you remember what it was like to be him? Do you remember what it's like to be promised things and not get it? Why do you deserve him to believe you now? Because persuasion is about trust. Persuasion is about consistency. You can't expect people. You don't hire stupid people. So why are you expecting that they're stupid? That's the big thing. Like, why do you expect them to just accept when if you were in the same position, you wouldn't accept it? I want leaders to look at the stuff and say, like, if I was a few notches down, would I trust this? And accept the power dynamic. You're not one of the kids anymore. You're not one of the other regular employees. You have surpassed this to a point of responsibility, and you impact people's lives. You impact people's futures. You impact whether their kids can go do the after-school clubs, whether they can pay their mortgage. And this makes me irate because it's like when you so used to working with the numbers and making it work. Why should people trust you if you make decisions based on numbers and you wonder why they're commitment is down. That's my soapbox.
Well, the alternative is always just putting some values posters on the wall.
I hate those so much. Oh. It's like it's value whitewashing. It makes the leadership feel like they're doing something. I worked at one company and they were given 6 values. It was a small 30-person company. And the CEO told me that they think that their theory was where these came from. Like, where did these come from? They're like, well, I think the owner read it in Flight magazine and brought them back. So we worked to narrow down to 3 that the employees could get behind. We did a workshop. Which of these 6 are actually relevant to drive things? Where do you think that they actually are doing well? And which ones would you like to aspire to? We narrowed it down to 3.
And then where else do they live? So they're not just posters on the wall.
So they weren't even posters on the wall. We just used them in measuring success. We use them in terms of where people are at and whether that was being shown in behavior. Any more than 3, the rule of 3 is always like people can remember 3.
I think they've I love vision and values, but not just for the sake of to your point, words on a page, but if they're deep rooted in recognition schemes and performance management and recruitment, then they have a place. Then they feed into culture, in my experience.
If they're done purposely, and if you're giving promotions to people who are doing the exact opposite, don't expect people to trust them.
Or don't expect to achieve the culture that you want to achieve. Yeah. And so on the subjects of culture, so I read something about the Olympics, not the Winter Olympics, the Olympics. So London 2012, if you cast your mind back for
yes, I was in this
years.
Country for it. I was.
You was?
I was, yes.
So London 2012 was the first Olympic Games that had 0 fatalities in the preparations for the games, which shocked me when I read that. But the paper was asking the question, why was this? So a study was conducted and it found that this was all linked to or there was a link to the culture of the organisation. They had a culture of trust, of openness, open communication. So I think, to me, when I read this, I was like, brilliant. That is a real tangible example of leadership and culture done well to achieve a tangible, positive outcome.
Also, I'd say it's a great example of people not using open culture as passive-aggressive license to be a really awful person.
Yeah.
It's like they said I should be open. No, that reminds me of a study that was done with hospitals. I believe it was a study in the States. And they were looking at hospitals that had a higher reported rate of incidents or mistakes, had better patient outcomes because they were open to learning from the mistakes and catching and saying, hey, this happened, and not hiding it. Whereas ones where they had 0 or very little, they had higher rate of fatalities and was a more dangerous place for the patients to be because the doctors, nurses, medical staff were more concerned about covering their own ass than the patient's outcomes because of the culture of the hospital, the culture that they weren't allowed to show weakness. Actually, so this is going to be kind of around. My son is going to be 5 soon, and I have a cargo bike, and they have a little Sony speaker that they get to choose what music.
Nice.
And there's this one song. It's like, "Oopsies, I made a mistake, and it's okay. It's okay. Oopsies, I made a mistake, and it's all to." It's all about learning. And
At least it's not Frozen. That's what
no Frozen in our house. But what I love about this song is that it's teaching the kids it's okay, you're learning from your mistakes, but also we need to learn from our mistakes. When we highlight that we're infallible, because we all are, we give ourselves space to learn from it. But if you're trying to be perfect all the time, if you're trying to say, oh no, I would never, you're bound to make more mistakes and you're covering up stuff, or you're not, I think it just comes down to learning. Like, what are you going to learn from this? These policies in place, these values in place, did they expect that outcome?
Were they aiming for that outcome? Yeah.
Yeah, like what inspired that, but also that they created a culture that allowed it, great, but that unforeseen benefit, no fatalities, that's great. However, you have to have a culture that's open for people. Actually, there was I worked in an energy company, multi-global, humongous behemoth. So that one was interesting because I worked in the digital space, and there was one product that was developed when you're drilling for oil, there's seismic scans, and they find where the layer of the oil in the porous rock, the rock sucks up the oil. They drill into that rock, the pressure and stuff, to do calculations, they suck the oil out. Sometimes when they look at the scan, sometimes they dig and there is no oil. It's a dry well. It's a mistake. So the team I was working with to communicate this product to help do scans and give a percentage chance of what's the chance it's going to be oil, they looked at historic scans and found the ones where it was a dry well could have been predicted if they had this product.
Okay.
But they weren't allowed to use that in the comms because it would embarrass people, even though it was years ago. Some of those leaders were still around. They were not allowed to use that because it would have shown that they made a mistake.
So this company, the energy company, like you said, is huge, and there presumably is many layers from the highest level of leadership down to the front line and coalface. So that's interesting in itself, and what leadership, comms, culture looks like there. So I read another study last night. I read a lot of studies last night and this morning, and again, this will be linked.
Okay.
But in these such organisations, typically. There was a survey done, and 65% of leaders at the top feel like they're great communicators and they communicate really well throughout the business.
So great.
However, down on the front line at the coalface in the study, only 35% of the people studied felt listened to. Difference, right? Broadcasting, listened to, understood. What can you relate to those stats in your experience?
Yeah. And also, like, when you think of communicating, if you think of most people are afraid of public speaking, and they've done a course, they've been coached, and now they can speak in front of people without being nervous. Yeah, that's a success. For their goal of what does communicating look like, communicating means looking statesman-like, like having pictures on LinkedIn, being invited to conferences. Like, what are you communicating and why? Why are you communicating? Are you doing it for self-promotion? Or do you want to hear what people want to say? And if you're going to hear what people want to say, are you ready of how you're going to respond? Because
are you open?
Are you open?
Like, to a response?
And it is like in PR, there's broadcasting. One way. There's very little until social media. In PR, there was very little two-way communication. Most of it was broadcasting. And if you think of how much. If you think of the Industrial Revolution, where you have people on the factory floor, did the people running the factories really care what their people did as long as they were getting stuff done? Like, if in 200 years, maybe 150 years, the purpose and value or the position of an employee has raised historically from where it was in terms of what companies need to be seen to be doing versus do they actually care? Who do they think they're communicating with?
Yeah.
And do they actually understand the employees they are communicating? And do they have a reason to motivate them? Do they really care? Do they have a reason, or do they just need to have a tick in the box of, I communicated? Like, that's the biggest issue with internal comms, is that people see communication as a tick in the box.
The top-down broadcast. Yeah.
My favorite thing to do is to work out with teams and figure out what they don't need to do. I had a team comes like, we need to put out a newsletter. And I'm like, okay, so do you have an audience you haven't reached? No. Do you have a stakeholder who wants visibility? No. I'm like, well, then you don't need a newsletter. And they're like, we don't need a newsletter. I'm like, yeah, unless you have a reason that you're filling a gap of engagement, why do you need to put more work on your plate?
Yeah.
But if you have people who see, oh, I did a post. Oh, I posted a picture. Oh, we did a all hands and we filtered all the questions to avoid all the difficult situations. Like, I go back to, like, Simon Sinek, he's made a lot of money off the Start With Why, and it's still relevant. why are you communicating? And be honest with yourself if you don't care about your employees. Maybe that's my most controversial thing. Do you actually care? And if you don't, live with it. Accept it. And it probably will be the most freeing thing a leader has by realizing they don't care about their employees. And I feel like...
But the results there versus a leader who does care will be night and day. So it's just made me think about. So I used to work for Sainsbury's in a previous life, and prior to me joining Sainsbury's, just when I joined, actually, the CEO was a guy called Justin King, and he is like hailed with turning Sainsbury's around, because prior to his tenure, it wasn't in a great place, and I think that his whole strapline was about making Sainsbury's great again. But he was a fantastic leader of that organisation, and he put frontline colleagues in the shops front and centre of everything, all of his strategies and plans and of his day-to-day existence. And rather than him sending out newsletters or doing whatever, he made a massive point of going out into the shops, being on the ground, speaking to employees, and he encouraged everyone in the head office to do the same. So we used to have Friday as our store working day. So everyone, all the leaders from Holborn, which was where the office would go out and spend time with people in the stores. But Justin was a celebrity. He was an absolute hero because he listened to people, and he did that. And he went so far as setting up a suggestion scheme for store colleagues called Tell Justin. And there was a whole team dedicated to responding to suggestions and implementing them. And they still spoke. Well, I was there for like 10 years post his tenure, and it was still spoken about. He was still spoken about then and his impact. So.
No, it has to be a conscious decision to invest time and effort in the front line. And once you build that trust, it's really hard to destroy it, because you become, people then have a relationship with you of who they think you are, but also they feel heard. Companies would save so much money if they just told their employees they did a great job. Because most people want to know that their work was relevant, that it was appreciated. If you show appreciation, so as much as I said, like, leaders, just admit that you don't care about your employees. On the flip side, when you do care, it makes a big difference. But you have to be consistent with it. You can't just do a one-off, oh, I did. It is a lifestyle choice to care about your employees. It is a purpose-driven investment. But you have to have the right drivers to keep it up, because once there's a break in the mask, and I've worked with CEOs who had a great mask, and it would slightly break my, okay, yeah, I know who you really are, but really great at acting like you did care. And I was like, hey, you know what you're supposed to be doing.
Okay, so we've covered a lot, Rebecca, and the final sort of topic area I want to delve into before we wrap things up is the context of leadership in 2026. So in 2026, we have AI, obviously boring. Everyone's talking about AI, but home working, and remote working. A lot of offices now here in London are empty most of the week because people are working at home. So what does leadership look like in this context today?
So I think leadership in terms of this is outside of what people expect. What does your team need? It's like putting just saying, oh, everyone needs to do this or everyone needs to do that. Like, you're not thinking critically, and it's lazy just to say, oh, you need to be back in the office. Is it impacting the economy in central London with stuff? Yes. Do things pivot? They should. Are there ebbs and flows of what you should be? Like, if the success of the city comes down to people need to go back to the office, how fragile is your economy?
What changes in terms of leading teams? What changes being remote versus being in person? Because in person, there's all the softer touch points you have with people just around as a leader around the office. You might have a informal coffee chat with someone or in the lift, and there's an opportunity there to build rapport and listen and two-way conversations. How do you replicate that building of trust, and to the previous point, two-way communication in a remote environment?
I'd like to see some better views of how to use technology, but also figure out what your team wants. Ask them how they want to communicate. Don't assume, but also it's the trust factor. And also, how do you measure productivity? But you need to know your team. You need to know your company. When I'm on to have client projects and I go on, I plan which days to go on. I know who's going to be in the office, who I need to talk with. I love my spontaneous conversations. I know what I need to get done, but I've purposely planned what I need to get done that day. Is it harder to chase people sometimes virtually? Yes, but it's a different kind of approach. I think it's just going to come down to learning, being open to doing stuff differently, but embracing it without looking at it as, oh, when we get back to the office, it'll be fine.
Rebecca, I think this is the perfect point to end the conversation. Thank you so much for your time and being open. I think we covered some really interesting, insightful points. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon, hopefully.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.